Hello, everyone, and welcome to UNB Talks Online, a webinar series presented by the UNB Associated Alumni. These sessions are presented by UNB alumni who volunteer their time to share their expertise with the UNB community on a variety of topics throughout the year. And today, we're going to spend the next hour together learning about personal leadership through emotional intelligence. It's a topic that appears to have resonated with our community. More than 190 UNBers from around the world registered to join us today. So thank you for being here, and from whatever corner of the globe you are joining us from, welcome. My name is Michelle McNeil. I'm a proud two-time alumna of UNB and the executive director of the UNB Associated Alumni. I do encourage all of you to share with us where you're joining us from. Tell us a little bit about your connection with UNB by using the chat. So you can use the chat there to just say hi to one another. Tell us a little bit about where you're from. And I have a really easy job today. I'm just the host, so I get the pleasure of learning along with all of you. I do think the topic today of emotional intelligence is one that will be hard to cover in an hour, so I'm looking forward to seeing how we do that. And as I mentioned, I'm the host, so my job will be to do an introduction, and then at the end, I'll lead the question and answer period. So we have about 40 minutes of a presentation, and then we'll have lots of time at the end for questions. I am going to ask some of the questions that were submitted when you registered, but if you have other questions that pop up throughout the session, there is a Q&A function in Zoom. It's a little tab on your Zoom app where you can go in and submit questions, and that's where I'll be looking to see if we have anything to ask our presenter. So it is now my great pleasure to introduce our expert for today's session. It's a special one for me, as I've learned so much from Kathy over the years and have benefited from her coaching in my own personal leadership journey. So Kathy Watt is also a proud two-time alumna of UNB. She earned her Bachelor of Arts in 1978 and her Master of Education in 2004. Kathy is the president of K. Watt and Associates and an associate with LMI Canada. As a respected and results-oriented executive and leadership coach, Kathy has built an impressive roster of clients, helping them to manage and expand their influence and their impact. As an international speaker, Kathy frequently presents on topics of change management, leadership, and productivity. Kathy has devoted her career to helping individuals and organizations achieve excellence. As I mentioned, she holds a master's degree in education. It's in instructional design and the National Professional Designation of the Canadian Society for Training and Development. So Kathy is also a certified training and development professional. For much of her career, Kathy coached and directed musical performance groups that achieved national and international acclaim. Her skills and passion for the development of people musically has translated naturally into her current work with business and corporate professionals. So welcome to Kathy.
Good morning, everyone, and I'm delighted to have an opportunity to meet with you this morning. As Michelle mentioned, it's going to be interesting to see what we can talk about regarding emotional intelligence in 40 minutes. I kind of giggled to myself when the alumni office asked me to do this because I thought, what can I possibly say? But we'll give it a go, and I'd like to share with you what we'll look to do in these next few minutes. First of all, I want you to understand or create awareness in terms of understanding the role and the importance of emotional intelligence in effective personal leadership. The reason that we've used the term personal leadership and not just leadership is that this is about leading your life. And what I'm talking about today has great resonance in terms of your personal life with family, friends, and so on, as well as it does in your professional life. We can't understand how emotional intelligence can be used unless we understand what an emotional hijack is and how we learn to interpret that in our own bodies and minds to make use of our own understanding. And also, the third bullet point is to increase our self-awareness. The foundation of any personal or professional growth begins with self-awareness. And so we will talk about that. And also, I'm going to give you a couple of strategies today to help you not only create increased self-awareness, but also to learn to manage your own and others' emotions more skillfully. So I'm going to take maybe 4 minutes to talk about what is emotion, or answer the question, what is emotional intelligence? The term has been around for about 30 years now, and there's lots of science to back it up. And so we all have some kind of an idea of what it is. But to put that in words becomes a little more difficult. And so I'd like to start with talking about the skills that we have, that we use, particularly in the workplace. And I've got a diagram up on the screen that talks about 3 domains of competence that we bring to any workplace scenario. Of course, our IQ is set when we are very young, and our IQ is what it is. We're not going to change that. Technical skills are the skills that you learned through post-secondary school, whether that's, well, obviously through the UNB, and we understand technical skills well in things like engineering, science, but of course in the arts, which is where I graduated, technical skills come with writing, critical thinking, and so on. So it stands to reason that any employer is hiring you on the basis of bringing a requisite normal intelligence and the technical skills that relate to the job. Emotional intelligence, however, what we have found over the last 30 plus years is that emotional intelligence, I've got it bolded here on this diagram, is more important than IQ and technical skills put together. There was a longitudinal study done at Harvard. It was done over a 30-year period. And although the term emotional intelligence was not used, people tracked over the 30 years from a variety of disciplines, whether they graduated from education, medicine, law, whatever, they tracked a wholesome definition of success. You know, it wasn't just making money, the houses, the cars, it was the quality of their life, quality of their relationships, and so on. And the results of that showed that 8 to 9% of their success in life and work was due to IQ. Another 8 to 9% of their success was due to the technical skills. We call these threshold competencies. And the employment world has learned a lot over bringing more than just IQ and technical skills to the world. Some are using EQ, or emotional intelligence, also called EI. But there is an awareness that you need more than that. And as a predictor of success, emotional intelligence more than was double IQ and technical skills combined. Now, you can always learn more technical skills and learn on the job. And the good news about emotional intelligence is that it can be learned. And that's why people like myself, who are executive coaches, are busy these days. And I was just having a conversation with Michelle before we started today, and said that probably 90% of my work is around this whole notion of emotional intelligence. I want to talk for a minute about our intention versus our impact. We judge ourselves in relationships with others, whether at work or at home, on what our intentions are. We know what's in our head and what's in our heart. Other people, however, judge us on the impact that we have with our words and our tone and our body language. And sometimes there's a gap between what we intend to communicate to others and how they feel about what we impact. And this is directly related to emotional intelligence in that our behavior, and in this I'm talking about, as I said, body language, words, and tone. Our behaviors are driven by emotions. I'm not saying they can be driven by emotions. I'm saying that our behavior is driven by emotions. You're going to hear me say in a few minutes that, well, I'll say it now. We've put so much importance on our mental capabilities. And we kind of assume that because we're smart people, we can handle many, many things. That's not actually the reality. Our emotions drive behavior. And as I continue through our slide deck this morning, you'll get a better understanding of what I mean. So I'm going to introduce, this isn't the only EQ competency model that's out there. It's the one that I was certified on 20 years ago now. And if we talk about having emotional intelligence competencies, the first one that many of you may be aware of is our ability to connect emotionally with other people. And that is, you've heard it said that within 10 seconds, people, if you walk into a room and you're with a small group of people, that small group can connect with you and they have a feeling and a sense of you in a very short time, like 10 seconds. Emotional connection is your ability to communicate, and that's not just talking, that's the whole piece. Your ability to coach others, which isn't telling them what to do, but asking questions, and your ability to express and emote empathy with others. Then we've got emotional management, and that is managing self and having an impact upon others being able to manage their emotional states. I get lots of pushback from workshop participants. Well, I can't possibly manage someone else's emotions. You're going to see when you learn about hijacks that your impact versus your intention has a lot to do with how others then respond to you and manage their own emotions. The categories here and the categories of skill include impulse control, and there are a whole number of words under that. Your ability to adapt and flex to a situation, your own personal drive, and authenticity. Can you manage communicating that and getting that out to others? The baseline, though, is the part that we're going to talk about most today, because in 40 minutes, if we can only create more self-awareness and your need to read more or study more or attend further training or receive executive coaching is based on this little model, which some of you will recognize as being similar to a tool that some of your children have had. And the self-awareness, everything else builds on your ability to be self-aware and rational about reasonable about how you're showing up. Whoops. Self-awareness is emotional self-awareness, your sense of self-regard, self-assessment, and also your ability to bring optimism to situations in your own life and that of communities of which you're a part, whether they be small or large. The final piece is the personal leadership. When you create the self-awareness and over time, you learn to manage your emotional states and manage through your own performance and connections, the next stage, that's when you are really successful at personal leadership and managing your own life and leadership. And this is so important, whether you're talking in terms of personal life or professional life. You won't remember this, but I wanted to put it out there anyway. Emotional intelligence then is the ability to effectively perceive, manage, and use one's emotions. And it's the ability to effectively manage emotional connections with those around us. And I think that the first thing I'd say is all of you are familiar with people for whom you find it easier to manage emotional connections. There are some more prickly people that we come in contact that it's more difficult for us to manage emotional connections, and for them to us as well. So I want to talk very briefly about the science. This is the fastest physiological explanation you'll ever get on how the brain works. But I think it's helpful in connection to understanding why we've made the statement that emotions drive behavior. And therefore, if we want to be having connections and communications with people where they receive our intentions and not receive a different impact than what we attend, we need to understand this. So we're smart people. We're all grads and alumni of UNB. We get that. And I want to ask you these questions. Which have you experienced? A situation where you mentally froze, but a few minutes later, you thought of all the great comebacks or what you should have said. Again, when I'm in workshops with people and I can see multiple expressions at once, I can see heads starting to, oh yeah, that's me. When have you experienced a situation where you wanted to say no, but you ended up having said yes again? And when have you experienced trying hard not to fail into what might be a typical response for you, only to blow it again? If we're so smart, if we've got threshold skills, if we've got even moderate IQ, and we've got lots of technical skills, why do these things happen? How come it happens to smart people? Here's how it happens. If we think about the development of an embryo, the first part of the brain that is developed in the womb is the brainstem. The brainstem performs those basic functions which we don't even have to think about. Our body temperature, our ability to breathe, our heart rate, and our influxes. This is also sometimes called the primal brain. The next part of the brain that is developed is as the hippocampus, which we have one on the left, one on the right. And on both sides of our brain, we have a small organ that is called the amygdala. The amygdala is the Greek word for almond, and that's because it is about the size of an almond. This is the site of our emotional memory. When things that we've remembered that may be not a part of our cognitive filing system, but we remember based on behavioral response. And the best example I can give you is baby. When a baby cries, a mother or father gets to know the different cries from one another. And we know when the baby needs changing. There's a different cry often when the baby is hungry or just unwell. And there's a different cry when the baby wants the diaper changed. And we've all got emotional memories that sometimes we're aware of them, sometimes we're not. It's the site also of our emotional learning, things that we've learned without having to think about. For example, people that you're just safe with. Those are emotional learnings based on having been with that individual or group of individuals in the past. You know where you're safe. Really, this is the answer. And in grade school, we learned fight or flight. It answers one critical question of human survival. Do I eat it or does it eat me? And this part of our brain has so much more power over us than we have ever realized. Finally, we get to the part of the brain that we're all more familiar with, and which society, and if I may say universities in general, have given much more attention to, and that's the neocortex, prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain. That's where our IQ resides. It's the site of our working memory. As a senior, I can now say when it works. And that neocortex is what we need to put back into action when we've been flooded by emotions that come from our more primal brain, and especially the emotional brain. And we're all wired this way, people. Nobody gets to escape it. Emotion comes before thought. We lived a certain part of our life thinking that we were in control of ourselves. And many of us have more control over that emotion not leading before the thinking comes, but we're all hardwired this way. And human beings feel before we think. And it's been a long time coming for workplaces, and actually it's better, but there's a long way to go with emotions being accepted as a natural part of any workplace environment. Why is it important to understand this as a leader? Well, until you have been successful at creating the emotional connection, being aware of how you impact others, and also being able to manage both your emotional states and others, people don't get along well in the workplace. And this, I can tell you, even though I've been doing workshops and coaching people for 20 years in this is not well understood in today's workplace. I want to go to helping you understand what a hijack is, and it really depends on those previous diagrams that I just showed you. But a hijack is a flooding of your emotional brain. And we all have them, whether or not we want to admit. They come in varying degrees. A full-blown hijack, an example of it might be if you've stepped out on a busy street and for some reason you missed a car that was barreling down at you. You don't need to stop and have a conversation with yourself before you jump back onto the sidewalk. You just do that. A slow jack could be a person who has already been in your office 3 times this morning, and yet they've knocked for a 4th time and you're trying to get something done to come and ask you a question. And that's an example of, they may not see it on your face, but there's a slow burn. Or that can be a child who has been, playing the same string for most of the day, and you're just working on your last nerve. That's a smaller hijack. Hijacks are sudden and they're unexpected. We don't expect them. We don't plan for them. They're usually against your will. If we all had our druthers, we'd say, well, we want to certainly control that. They tend to be forceful, especially if they're big ones. And this can be, put us into full flight or fight, or it can be an accumulation of smaller, forceful little jolts of where we're irritated or anxious, or even just nervous about picking up the phone and making an uncomfortable phone call. There tends to be a loss of control, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. And it's definitely Just like hijacking a bus or hijacking an airplane, it's taking you someplace that you weren't planning on going. An emotional hijack results in an immediate body response. So let's go back, because I think you'll all understand, have the visualization of the oncoming car or bus in a city street. Your heart rate goes up immediately. You have no control of it. Your breathing is suddenly much more rapidly, and your reflexes are poised. You are equipped physiologically with your muscles to make one fast move back toward the sidewalk, even if you're falling back. And you'll see that on the diagram, it's coming from that emotional part of the brain. And so it floods our primal brain, where we have the context of not being able to control what happens, and it floods our thinking brain as well. When it floods our thinking brain, we are no longer able to think rationally. And ordinarily with our thinking brain, we can hold multiple variables, and we can create patterns and put variables together to come up with complex thought. If you've been flooded with emotion in your prefrontal brain and nothing happens, if it's unaddressed, it's going to last for 18 minutes. And that's why you never, if you've gotten a rotten email that just made you furious, you never address it until much later in the day, because you can be guaranteed that you're going to send what you think is the perfect answer, which is the place to go, the one default position. And that's usually not a good idea. And I can almost hear your thinking, because most of us have done that. We experience, when it's unaddressed, toxicity in our body. It's a good thing because we've got increased reflexes, and the ability to respond with our big muscles. But the chemicals come into our bloodstream to equip our large muscles to fight or run away. What we don't have is a clear brain, because the blood flow has been shunted to our large muscles to prepare us to respond. And the toxicity of the cortisol and adrenaline and other chemicals that are released to help us respond in fight or flight mode is staying in our system. And I'll just quickly finish up on this slide by saying this is why 20 some years ago, it started to be accepted among health professionals that stress was a real thing. And stress is an accumulation of a whole bunch of flooding of things until our body can no longer respond intelligently to it. Our body takes over, and we start having things like anxiety attacks or depression, or a whole host of other mental illnesses that affect us in our whole life. How can we manage the emotional impact of hijacks so that we're more capable? Well, this is one of the first strategies or takeaways from our little chat today. And it has to do with just taking time to be more self-aware. Being self-aware and noticing what's going on in our body so that we're in a better state to respond with empathy and a sound mind. Because when you're hijacked, remember I said that the blood flow moves from the top of your body to all of your muscles to prepare you for fight or flight. Well, your brain doesn't have the blood flow. And frankly, folks, we become stupid. And we can still talk, but we are not in a good place to talk. Haven't got time to go into first responders, but that's where training takes in. So I'm talking more generally in an everyday scenario. This is where we want self-awareness to be enhanced. And your own self-awareness can be enhanced. Many of us need help doing that because we're used to who we are, we like who we are, and think we're doing a pretty good job. But the people that I work with, and right now I'm working almost exclusively with leaders from UNB, are all very much motivated to enhance their self-awareness and learn more about themselves in those areas that have just come up. And also looking at and understanding what triggers them to move into hijack, even if it's not a full-blown, but it's a smaller one of building irritation over the day. What is a trigger anyway? Well, it's something or someone, because people can be triggers to us if we haven't controlled our emotions and thinking about whether or not we let someone be a trigger. And certain situations or certain people will trigger you. I'll give you a quick example. I used to have someone in my family, she's passed away now, but when her name came up on my phone, the relationship was so dysfunctional, and there was so much emotional garbage that came with the calls. It was my sister, so what was I going to do? That it triggered me, and I immediately had increased heart rate and went into all kinds of emotional responses. So that's what a trigger is. That's why I say it can be a situation or an individual. And again, the hijack comes, as we talked about the hijack, the trigger goes into your amygdala, which prompts our primal brain to respond immediately without thought. It just happens. And what it does is it hijacks or inhibits our judgment, our ability to think clearly. We have more certainty about what the right answer is. That's why we have regrets when we speak in the moment. And after the situation is done, we think, oh, why did I say that? Well, without self-awareness, we're just going to say the first thing that comes to our mind, and we're pretty darn sure we know what it is. The other thing is that we have less self-control. We might speak in a loud voice or shout. We definitely make more errors. So if you're trying to do things, for example, if you're trying to balance a spreadsheet or write a paragraph, you can't think. And that moves us toward our default behavior. And so, for example, worse than irritating, the inappropriate email. That's why if you go on your keyboard, you're going to bang. That's your default. I'm angry. And also you'll say things that you wouldn't think if you had time to cool down. In the self-awareness program, I want to talk just a minute about your body. Your body's your early warning system, and that's where you need to pay attention. The body it helps responds to the amygdala, and here's how it responds. If I had you here, I'd get you to tell me because you know these things. First of all, it responds in 0.85 milliseconds. Folks, your brain, your cognitive prefrontal cortex is not going to have any control over that. And the symptoms are things like perspiring. It can be under your arms, it can be down your back, it can be in other places. Your body could start to literally vibrate. Inside, you may feel butterflies in your stomach, or you may feel like your heart's going to explode out of your chest. Your speech, you start to stutter and you can't get out sometimes what you want to, or if you do get out, you find that you're shouting. And we tend to squint, or else our eyes become, our pupils are fully dilated and we've got pop eyes. We look like we're crazy. And so we've got to assess And what is my body telling me? My body is telling me that I need to do something to control myself first so that I can't respond to others. I have all kinds of people saying, well, Kathy, I mean, what do you do? It comes from a place that I have no control over and it happens so quickly. I'm going to give you a clue. So your first strategy is to use your body as an early warning system. The next is a strategy, SOS, which we all know as save our souls. And in this context, the 3 letters are an acronym for 3 behaviors. And the first one, the first S, is stop. Just stop what you're doing. Don't say anything. Just stop. Disengage to re-engage more powerfully. This might be 15 seconds. And you know, in North America, 15 seconds is a lifetime when you're talking to someone or when even virtually. We want to fill all the airtime we can, so it doesn't come naturally to us. So I'm saying stop and take a few seconds. And here's the next part. Oh, in order to make the model work, I would have liked to said the other word, but oxygenate, breathe. Remember I said that the blood flows from your brain into all of your large muscles to be able to respond. So what you need to be able to do is breathe deeply. And I had a conversation yesterday with someone who called me, and I mean, they were what I call head up. They were just fit to be tied. So I listened, and without sounding too awful to them, I said, I want you to do something for me. I want you to take a couple of deep breaths. And sometimes doing that for yourself is the second step. First, stop and think about it. Okay, I'm out of control. O, oxygenate or breathe. And this is conscious, deliberate. And it's all right if you take that time. The world won't end. The other person might hang up on you, but that's good. That's going to give you even more time. I'll come back to the last one in a minute. Here's a scenario. It's 10 a.m. and your boss calls and leaves you a voice message saying, we have to talk, see me at 3 o'clock. So the thoughts you have are going to ruminate from, oh gosh, what have I done now? And oh, I've probably messed up again. We go to the worst place scenario and we can think of all of the things. We will spend from 10 a.m. until 3 p.m. trying to figure out what is it that I'm being called in there for. We call this awfulizing. And when you're awfulizing or thinking of worst case scenarios and blaming yourself, folks, you're in a constant state of slow jacking all the way up to really getting yourself into a state. And if we had time, we'd discuss this question, but I want to show you something from a research project with, statistically validated. We've proven, or it has been proven, that people walk around, and this has been measured. They have thoughts about the future, thoughts about the past, thoughts of doubt, worries about health. The thoughts about the future make up about 40% of their thinking. And by the way, I am a strategic planner and I help people do that. So sometimes that's really, really important, but not if it's not driven in a direction. We have thoughts about the past, thoughts of doubt, thoughts about our health. 92% of our thoughts are not a true picture of the here and now and being present. And I use this term, and a lot of my clients use this term a lot, about the need to be present in your exchanges. This is how you create emotional connection. And so I want to, the moral of the story is you don't have to believe everything you think. So emotional management, managing yourself, that's where the SOS comes in. The first S is stop, disengage to re-engage more powerfully. O, oxygenate or breathe. And the final S is seek information. This is where we start to ask questions, strengthen your curiosity so that your own amygdala and the other person's amygdala can be soothed. We need to remove the effects of the trigger. And I'm at the end of my time, but one of the things that I often say to people who are enhancing their leadership is your ability to ask good questions is directly proportional to your ability to lead effectively. So in review, we're emotional beings before we are rational beings. Understanding how emotional hijacks can take over our thinking mind is important. We need to create and understand that our body becomes our early warning system for self-awareness and better emotional management. And then finally, that stop, oxygenate, and seek information is a strategy that we can use for ourselves and others. And so I'll turn our program back over to Michelle.
Thank you so much, Kathy. For everyone else, I mentioned at the beginning that I've learned a lot from Kathy in my own personal leadership journey, and that's through different sessions over the years, but particularly over the course of about 9 months, I took part in a leadership forum offered here at UNB that Kathy led, and I don't even know how you picked what to present in 40 minutes, Kathy, because of all the time that we spent together. But I would just say before we get going with the questions, if this was sort of a new topic for anyone joining us, or something that you think you might like to learn more about, there are all kinds of resources out there, and I would encourage you to dive into it, because I think we spent a whole day just on self-awareness in that session that we did before, Kathy, and then throughout the 9 months. So thank you so much for getting that down to something more easy and manageable in the time that we had. We did have some reactions from people in the chat, so I think people were engaged and enjoyed what you presented. I am going to ask a question that I think you kind of answered through your session already, but I just wanted to dive in a little bit more to it. So someone asked if EQ is innate only, so you either have it or you don't, or they're asking if it can be learned.
Okay, so I'll answer the question this way. We all have some measure of EQ, but we've all met people who seem to come into our lives and they've just been given the gift. They easily make friends, and they did this all through school. They connect easily with others. And in moments of trials and tribulation, they're the person that seems to be able to keep a cool head. And we might say, well, they are just innately emotionally intelligent. And so, yes, some people have developed more emotional intelligence, and it's an outcome of their growing up in a certain kind of family, how much they learn to get along and be at ease with discomfort and so on. And the second question I did answer, emotional intelligence is a skill that absolutely can be learned, but it is not learned in a 45-minute session, nor even a one-day session. It takes a lot of time and feedback and work, but it can absolutely be learned.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. Yeah, I don't think you ever fully reach an optimal level of emotional intelligence.
No.
Yeah. We had a question that was submitted ahead of time that connects to one that was just submitted in the Q&A. And so the question submitted ahead of time was about you providing some thoughts on the balance between logic and empathy. And so the idea that, sometimes people can be quite emotional, but the sky isn't always falling. So whatever it is that people are upset about, that, there might be some logic that comes into play. And then we had a similar question online from a first responder who does tend to, go pretty quickly to once they're assured that everything is actually okay. They can sometimes be seen as a bit dismissive, but they don't feel that they're being that way. So just wondering if you can offer any insights into that balance between jumping to that prefrontal cortex that you talked about and away from the emotional response.
Yeah, that's a great question. And during COVID, for the first 2 years, 20 and 21, and I now just have a few, I worked with a lot of doctors and medical practitioners. And this is where training takes over from the emotional hijack, because our first responders, our medical professionals, or as I say, a firefighter, we don't want them suffering an emotional hijack and being paralyzed like the other people in the situation may be. And this is where we have learned so much in training and development from military training. Some people don't like hearing that, but there are many, many areas in life where training will supersede the emotional hijack, and it is automatic. And that's why it's called training. The steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are integrated and internalized to the point where that becomes an automatic response. It's done so much. And aren't we grateful that medical doctors, for example, who are doing emergency surgery, they're not in a hijack situation, which we might be if we were observing the surgery of our loved ones. It's rote for them. They know exactly what to do because they've trained and practiced and trained. And so that's what we have to do with our own growth and development, is train ourselves to respond.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Janice has asked a really important question about how we can tell if someone else is being hijacked, and especially if it's something that we might have done to cause it unintentionally. So are there any cues that you can help us to be seeing when someone else needs that time and space?
Well, I think the first thing you'll notice if you're in the room with them, the first thing that will happen is they'll sit up straighter and they'll move backwards. And that's an unconscious bodily response to getting further away from you and protecting themselves. They may not be able to move any further back than the chair. Their eyes will be wide, or the blood will completely drain out of their face. And so just reading body language, we've all heard within communication training that, body language tells us so much more than the words do. And so if we acknowledge within 10 seconds that we've inadvertently flooded the party that we're talking to by going right to the nub of the issue instead of approaching it in another way, I think the first piece of advice I would give is fess up or ask a question. You might say, I think I've inadvertently upset you. That wasn't my intent. Can we start over again? And, your body language, you leaning toward the person, whether you lean back or whether you lean forward has a message. Whether you cross your arms and, the boss is sitting with his arms crossed or her arms crossed. When you come in the room, there's going to be something else happen than, oh, good afternoon. So,
yeah. So you talked a little bit about when you're in the room with a person, but earlier you did mention sort of doing some of this training virtually. And so someone asked a question about evaluating emotional intelligence and those responses in this time when we're virtual so often and we don't have access to as much of the body language or the feelings that you might feel in a room with someone.
Well, I would kind of push back against the fact that we can't read emotions virtually, because I do it all the time. Now, if you're with one person, that's much easier than if you're with a team of 8 or 10. But just learning to watch people's faces is the first cue. But you asked a question about, evaluating ourselves and doing assessments. There are some great statistically validated IQ assessments that you can get. The problem with them is that somebody will pay a lot of money for them and they'll have a professional debrief it. But look, you're going to go back to your way of life unless you have a coach working with you who understands what to do with the information and how to help you engage in cognitive behavior change. It's difficult to do. However, just creating awareness, reading books, and the best ever are the Daniel Goleman books, even though they're now, going on 3 decades old. Emotional intelligence, working with emotional intelligence, you can develop awareness. So if you can't afford further development, there are some things to do.
So we do have a question about managing a team through EQ. And this is a topic where I literally spent 9 months with you learning it. So I don't know how much you can dive into right now, but I mean, the concept is, everyone has sort of positive and negative reactions to certain things, and how you can bring this into leading a team. So whatever you can say about that in a couple of minutes, Kathy.
Okay, knowing that it really does take 7 to 9 months to change your behavior, here's if there's a word of wisdom to offer, it's be curious enough about yourself to get some feedback and find out whether your intention of what you want to do for people. I haven't met anybody yet that wants to go to work and be a bad boss. Does your intention align with the impact that you're having on people? And sometimes leaders are not aware of how they're affecting people. So that's my word to the wise. But it really, if you're going to change the behaviors and enhance your leadership, it does take some work.
One of the habits that I learned from you, Kathy, that I think I incorporate into my work almost daily, I try to do it every day, is around that intention piece that you mentioned. And so it's not always easy to do because you have to carve out the time, but it's that idea behind any meeting or conversation you're about to go into, just taking a moment to think about what your intentions are for that meeting. And then that helps you with your approach before you go in. So that's just a quick little tip, but I learned that one from you. So we do have someone that's asking about one of the first slides that you posted around 8 to 9% of success being determined by IQ and 8 to 9% by technical skills. And so they're asking about the percentage related to emotional intelligence. Is it the remainder or?
Well, it isn't. No, it isn't the remainder, but it is double because there are so many factors that come into play. Emotional intelligence is more than double the combination of IQ and technical skills put together. So we're looking at somewhere in the 60% of your success is due to emotional intelligence. That's pretty significant. This isn't saying you only use 8 to 9% of your intelligence in a day. We're talking about in terms of your effect and your success in life and work.
So I have a question that hits home for me. It's not from me, but it could have been. One was submitted ahead of time and then one was here. So I'm going to ask about it. You were talking about your body's responses to triggers and the body's as an early warning system. And the person that submitted the question here and the one ahead of time is a crier. And so I'm also a crier. When I get triggered, one of my reactions is tears in my eyes. And they're just asking for some advice on how to make that happen less often or to stop it more quickly when it does happen.
Yeah, and that's a great question because so many people are wired this way. Our emotional response is not to get angry and shout. It is to literally cry. And so preparation is the most important thing. And that preparation comes in the form of understanding that tears are not appreciated. Anger is better accepted in the workforce than tears. And so if you can keep yourself from crying, the breathing and having a response ready and breathing 2 or 3 times and allowing the space to go and say, I need a few minutes to be able to think about this. Could we have this conversation later? So it's creating a distance. Or if you're in a meeting where that's not possible, asking if you could defer this until just a few minutes. You need to do some thinking. And so then you get your amygdala back in by becoming curious. What's causing me to do this? And you can't really do anything other than breathe fully and get the tears under control somewhat. And you still may have a quiver. It happens all the time with a lot of people.
Yeah, Janice mentioned something in the chat that she sometimes explains that she's not sad, she's just leaking. And it made me chuckle because that's it for me, where sometimes the tears come, but I'm not sad and you haven't made, it's just, that's my just emotional reaction to whatever just happened. So it definitely never happens at the right time. So
No.
we have another attendee. We've only got time for probably one or two more questions. So they're asking about the law of hardwiring that you talked about, where the emotion comes before the thought, we feel before we think. And they've asked for you to tell us a bit more about the impact of the possible hijacking's place in that. So if there's any way that you can intentionally choose your thoughts about a situation, that might influence how you feel.
One is what you talked about, Michelle, and that is developing a habit of stopping, even if it's for 2 or 3 minutes, to think about a situation that you're going into. And if you know the individual, attempting to predict what's going to set this person off inadvertently. That's not what you mean to do, but the way we approach things. And, that takes some conversations. Well, I've been leading in a management position for 15 years. I just do what I do. Well, you can learn new skills, because regardless of how gifted you are, the other person may not have had the benefit of learning how to engage. And so whether it's a reporting relationship or whether it's a collegial relationship, we can inadvertently hijack somebody else and they're not in their best space. And so that's where having empathy to say, notice if they've done the body response, it's saying, it's acknowledging, maybe I'll come back to you in a few minutes, give them a few minutes to think about that. That's a quick response.
Yeah, that's helpful. So I've got 2 more questions I'm going to ask. And the last one will be, I think, an easy one for you. So this question is asking about cultural intelligence. And so that would be a whole other webinar probably, but they're, asking about that intersection between emotional intelligence and then interacting with different cultures and how this might play across cultures.
Oh, okay. I can't possibly answer that in 1 minute. But it really comes back to awareness and preparation. So, if you're meeting with people from a diverse cultural background, it's asking yourself, what do I need to know or what do I need to think about that would be pertinent in this situation? So that's empathy. That's stepping back and saying, what do I need to understand if I'm in the other person's shoes? And then asking yourself, how can I not go overboard, work too hard, but how can I meet the other person in a way that is consistent with their needs in their culture? That's beyond my expertise.
Yeah, so it's not directly related, but just to get a little plug in for another alum who did one of these sessions for us, there is an alumna, Sama El Malawi, who did a session for us last year. It's recorded, it's on our website, and it's about intercultural communication. And there was quite a bit of emotional intelligence in that. So that might be interesting to the person that asked the question. You can find that on our UNB alumni website. So the last question is asking about, they're asking specifically about how, if there's anywhere online that they can get more resources. And so you talked about Goldman's books, and that's yes. helpful, but are there, we see like IQ tests and things like that all over the all over the internet. Are there places that you can go to, resources you would suggest for people that want to explore this more?
Well, I just haven't used any of the quick and dirty because I've always had a validated assessment tool. And so plug it in, you'll get something back. And so I'm sorry, I don't have something that I can recommend, but there are all kinds of tools available that can be done for free. You'll have to get emails afterwards, the usual thing. Anything that's free is not really free. But yes, you can get an assessment done. And you can also find places to have a professional assessment done.
Yeah. And, I know it's not accessible to everyone, and you might not have these resources at work or anywhere else, but there are professionals out there. Not everyone's as awesome as Kathy, but there are professionals out there that can help as well. And I value the time that we spent together, Kathy, because I learned so much. So if you do have that opportunity in your workplace, I'd encourage you to do that. So somehow we managed to fit this into an hour, Kathy. Ooh. Nice work.
So Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm going to wrap up now. I don't have too much to add, but I did want to say a really big thank you again to you, Kathy, for sharing your knowledge and
My
expertise
pleasure.
so generously with our alumni community. So thank you. And if this is your first time joining us, I will just reiterate, Tash put the link in the chat there, but we've had alumni sharing this kind of knowledge and expertise with us through these webinars for the last 3 years. So if there might be other topics you're interested in, you can go check those out online. And on that note, I did want to say thank you to Tash Rigo. She works in the alumni office, and among many other things, she plans and coordinates this series. And so if you have topics you'd like to see covered in the future, you can email us at alumni@unb.ca, and Tash will work on finding an alum that has that expertise to present to us. I'd also like to say a big thank you to our affinity partners through the Alumni Association and all of our alumni who support us through these programs. So through these affinity partnerships with TD Insurance and Manulife, it's how we're able to bring you this series and many, many other programs. And we also use the money generated from those to support our students through scholarships. And finally, thank you to all of you for joining us, spending this time with us and staying connected to UNB. If you need anything from the alumni office, please reach out to us anytime, and we're happy to help keep you connected to the university. So thanks again, and have a great day, everyone.